I appreciate that.
When he's so older, he goes, what are they doing here? They shouldn't be here. And I'm like, shut up. What do you know? He goes,
Do we have the iMag?
Yes.
So
the little couple just walked in. They will celebrate their 1 year wedding anniversary.
1 year?
Yes.
Bless.
His wife died.
That is so
or
cute.
something, and she was a nurse that he used to work with. And then she got shipped to the East Coast.
good afternoon. Nice to see you here. Is it hot enough out there for you? Is it hot in here? Y'all want to cool it off a little? I tell you, this morning I was freezing in here. Were you all? Couldn't figure out if it was my nerves or if it was really cold. But it seemed awfully cold. Well, we're delighted to welcome you this afternoon. Delighted to welcome those that continue to stream in. We're just glad to have you here. This is an interesting topic for a Sabbath afternoon. I think of an experience written out by Bill Hybels, from which I borrowed and tried the same. Hybels says that he had a seminary professor that talked about how to preach about sex and sexuality. It was written up in an article years ago in Leadership Journal entitled Preaching About That Oh So Delicate Subject. His professor asked the students one day in class, how many of them had heard a sermon dealing with some aspect of the biblical concept of sexuality in the main worship service of whatever church they attended? How many of them had heard? And so those who had, and there weren't many, all raised their hands. In fact, I'm just curious here this afternoon, if we took today off the table, not today, but any other time, how many of you have been to church, wherever it is that you attend, and you have heard a main worship service sermon dealing with a biblical concept of sexuality? Let me see your hands. How many? So, not too many, but a fair number. So Hybels' teacher then went on to ask, how many of you have been to church and heard a sermon dealing with some aspect of biblical prophecy? Just prophecy. Now, in that classroom, virtually every hand went up. Let me see in this, look at that, every single one. And then he asked, how many times this week did you think about prophecy? I mentioned this morning when talking with Dr. Celeste that the world around us can't seem to stop talking about sex. In fact, this week I read of an analysis that was done of the TV show Friends. Now, I watched Friends at times back in the day. I haven't seen it in a long time, but you're familiar with what show I'm talking about, Friends. They analyzed the sexual partners, the named identifiable partners that appeared on the show. Not the unnamed ones that had references to them but weren't actually people who appeared on the show over its however many year run. I don't remember how many year run it was. And there were 85. 85. Now, that was an immensely popular show. In fact, some argue that it helped change the culture in some significant ways, added vernacular and terminology and conversations to the culture. I share that only to say the culture around us is talking about sex and sexuality and talking about it a lot. If we don't have anything to say in the church, we're in trouble. It's a biblical concept. It's a biblical topic. We affirm that it's a gift of God. So we ought to have something to say about it other than simply don't. I grew up in a world where that was the primary message that I took away from my church experience, could be, in terms of sexuality, could be summarized in that one word, don't. Whether that meant don't do it or don't talk about it or any other don't, that was a message that came home rather loudly and rather clearly. Well, that's not a message we want to communicate but we want to communicate a healthy message, a positive message, biblically sound, relationally rich, and personally robust, something important about sex and sexuality. So as we were putting this camp meeting series together, we wanted to try to do something along these lines. And my sister, Mary Ellen Weingartner in Keene, Texas, said, I know who you need to ask. You need to ask Dr. Celeste Holbrook to come. She's been here at our camp meeting and people loved her. And so thank you, Mary Ellen, and thank you, Dr. Celeste, for being here. We really, really appreciate it. And look forward to the time this afternoon. I want to remind you that, again, tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., 11 a.m., and at noon down in DeMazo Amphitheater in the Centennial Complex, there will be 3 breakout sessions. The topics were in the bulletin this morning, or you can get them in the lobby. And we would love to have you join us there as well. So as we begin this afternoon, I'd like to invite you to bow your heads and pray with me. Gracious God, we're so grateful for the love and the mercy and the blessings that you extend to us, for your presence in our lives, for this wonderful gift called sexuality that you have given to us. Lord, it creates, on the one hand, great intimacy and joy and pleasure, and on the other hand, incredible pain and alienation and shame. Our desire is to help heal and move in a positive, robust direction. So we pray this afternoon that you would bless Dr. Celeste to that end, and through her, do the same for us. Might we grow as a result of having been here. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. So would you welcome Dr. Celeste Holbrook?
Hello, everyone. Oh, you're so bright and vibrant, and I see lots of smiles, and you're ready to have this conversation about sex, right? Right. It's the most excited you've been on a Sabbath afternoon ever. Usually you're at home doing it. Now we can be here talking about it, right? Excellent. I learned very early on, as a young Adventist, what Sabbath afternoon naps were, that my parents did. So I appreciate you coming out. This is the reason I love my job, is because I get to come out and see people showing up and saying, hey, I want to work on my intimate life. I want to work on my intimate relationship. I want to become vulnerable for a few hours here and admit that maybe I don't have everything figured out yet. I don't have everything figured out yet. So this is my favorite part of my job, is you. So thank you from the very bottom of my heart for showing up today so we can have a fun, educational, spiritual dialogue, conversation about sex. Thank you. So I'm Celeste. I'm a sexologist. I would like to ask you a few things. You might be sitting here and you might be thinking, is this workshop for me? Is this workshop for me? So I've had this question asked to me several times already today. Will I fit in here? Am I going to get anything out of this? Is this workshop for me? I will tell you. Are you stuck somewhere? Maybe you experience low libido. Maybe you are a new parent. Maybe you find it difficult to talk about sex with your spouse. Maybe you have trouble in certain areas. Maybe you're just curious about making sex better. Maybe you haven't had sex in a while and you'd like to get that started again. Maybe you experience shame around your sex life. Those are all great reasons for you to show up today. So if you identify with any of these things, you are in the right spot, and I am so glad you are. We're going to talk about how to have healthy sexual dialogue today. Now, Celeste, what does that mean? Does that mean dirty talk? Not really. Healthy sexual dialogue is a way to have conversations about sex that make sense. Okay, and we're going to talk about how to have conversations that move you in a direction that is healthy instead of backwards or sideways. Because we don't really, in our society, have great frameworks for which to have these conversations. Nobody has really given us the tools to say, this is how you talk about sex with your partner, this is how you talk about sex with your kids, this is how you build a healthy, sexy, intimate life. Nobody has told us that. Because there's this huge misnomer that sex is just, what? Natural. Sex should come naturally. And that's a big mistake to think that. Sex doesn't come naturally. Sex is a behavior just like eating, just like sleeping, just like communicating, just like having a relationship. It's all built on behaviors. So sex is something we must learn and relearn during the different phases of our life. I want to tell you a little bit about my story. But not the fancy Photoshop story. This is the real authentic story. This is me building this presentation, eating a big, huge bowl of cereal in the morning. So I grew up in an Adventist setting. I grew up in Keene, Texas. And I had Adventist parents who were loving and kind. And I made the decision to wait until I got married before having intercourse. I thought this was a really healthy decision, and I was happy about my decision, and maybe there wasn't just a whole lot of opportunity, I don't know, whatever. I was happy that I waited until I got married to have intercourse. But then, when I did, on my wedding night or afternoon, because I got married in the morning, because my dad says you should get married in the morning just in case it doesn't work out, you haven't wasted the whole day. So I got married in the morning, and then the afternoon, I had sex for the first time. So I walk into the room. Here I am in my wedding gown, and I peel off my eyelashes, take out my hair extensions, take off my makeup, pull down my Spanx. By this time, I think my husband's going to be on the phone with his lawyer talking about a bait and switch. But thankfully, he's not. He's a good man of good character. So everything happened. I won't go into details, but it was really horrible. And I ended up black mascara weepy in this Egyptian cotton sheets on my honeymoon. It was very painful, and I felt immediately large amounts of shame that I didn't have this beautiful, amazing, swinging from the chandelier sex on my honeymoon. But it didn't get better. I thought maybe I'm just old, maybe things are rusty, maybe I need to do this for a little while, get things going, and it just didn't get any better. I went through the whole first year of my marriage having really disappointing, shame-filled intercourse. And if you've ever been freshly married, you know that things like resentment, anxiety, fear, disappointment, those are things that freshly married people don't know how to navigate. And I certainly didn't, and my husband certainly didn't. Add on to that, we were in his first year of medical school. So I essentially didn't see the man, and when I did, it was really frustrating. So at the end of my rope, I didn't know who to go talk to. And so I told my mom, because I didn't know who else to go to. I said, Mom, this is what's happening. I don't know what's going on. She said, go see the OB-GYN. Went and saw the OB-GYN, and he told me, as I'm laying there, very vulnerable, head crinkling on the little paper behind me, he said, Celeste, you know this painful intercourse will go away once you have kids. And I thought, that's a terrible answer. That's a terrible answer. And I wasn't sure, maybe he didn't understand how kids were formed or made or created, but you have to have sex to have kids, first of all. And second of all, I didn't want kids at the time. I was 1 year into marriage. I didn't want kids. And third, and probably one of the most important things, he didn't address all of the other things that were going on in my life, like the resentment and the shame and the fear and the anxiety about the sex I was having. So in that moment, I can still remember clearly in that moment thinking, I need help from somebody. I don't know who that is. But when I figure this out, I'm going to become the person I need in this moment. And 9 years later, here I am. So, my husband and I worked through things. I was already working on my PhD, getting a degree in health education. I focused on sexuality after that. And I went through a process, and what I now call sexual renovation. I went through a process of 3 stages where I figured out what was going on with me, what was going on with our relationship, and how do I fix it. And I realized after going through that process that I could apply these theories and these things to other people. So that's what I ended up doing. So the first step in this process, I'm going to take you through this 3-step process. There's going to be some journaling, there's going to be a little bit of discussion possibly, and at the end, I'm going to answer as many questions as I can. There will be cards handed out where you can ask a question anonymously, and I'll read them up here and answer them, as many of them as I can. I probably can't answer everybody's, but as many of them as I can. So I'm going to take you through that 3-step process today. And it's going to be fun, and it's going to be educational. And ultimately, I want you to walk away from this sanctuary having tools and the confidence to make your sex life better, wherever you are, even if you haven't had sex before, even if you're single at the moment, even if you've been married for 60 years. You're going to leave today with the ability to make your intimate life better. I truly believe that sex is the super fuel for our relationships. It is the one thing that defines our relationship as different than our other girl-to-girl or guy-to-guy relationships. So I have a best friend, her name is Alicia. Alicia and I are very close. We talk about a lot of things. We are very intimate with each other. But I have sex with my husband. That is what defines our relationship from this relationship with Alicia. So I believe sex can be the super fuel for our relationships, but only if we understand how to dialogue about it, how to understand it as it relates to our spiritual health, and how to renovate it as our sex life changes over the phases of our life. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. So for the first step, awareness. Here's a beautiful quote by Carl Jung. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So has anybody ever told you, oh, I'm just not good at math, or I'm just a really terrible dancer? Some people consider these things fate, right? I don't believe that in sex. I believe that you can always improve and that you can get better because sex, above all things, is a behavior. So, in my practice, when people come to see me and they sit across from me in my therapy office, this is one of the first things I have them do. We become aware of what sex is for you currently. So you have a handout. I want you to flip it over to the blank side on the back. Grab a pen, and I want you to write sex is ... And then I really want you to explore how you currently feel about sex, the sex that's currently happening or not happening in your relationship. I want you to write down all the words, all the phrases, all the adjectives, colors, smells, I don't care. Nothing's off limits. Describe what sex is for you currently. Even if you're single or if you're not in a sexual relationship, you can write down what sex means to you right now, in the stage of life that you are now. Okay? So write sex is ... I'm going to give you things to chat about when you get home tonight. Write down all the words and phrases that sex currently is. Not how you wish it would be, not how it was, how it is currently. And this is the first step in sexual renovation. Sex is warm, energetic, intimate, painful, colorful, fun, exciting, boring, irrelevant. Use stream of consciousness and just write. Sex is, and then write everything that you can think of. So I do this in my practice for couples or individuals that come to me. And this is really important for any behavior that you would like to change or improve. You have to understand where you are and where you want to be in order to make that bridge and get there. So the first step is always awareness. So finish writing up. Sex is whatever it is, all the words, phrases, adjectives, sentences, nouns. And then we're going to move forward. So a little bit farther down your paper, the next thing, this is also what I ask my clients. My dream sexual experience would be. My dream sexual experience would be. Write down all the words, phrases. Some of them may overlap with what you have already written. Some of it might be new. What is your dream sexual experience? Because even in behaviors like sex, if you don't know where you would like to go, it's very difficult to get there. So we're figuring that out for you right now. For example, if you ever went to a trainer, just keep on writing. If you ever went to a trainer, they would say, what are your fitness goals? If you ever went to a dietitian or a nutritionist, what are your nutrition goals? If you've ever been to a piano teacher, what are your performance goals? These are your sex goals. They're legitimate. We're going to do them. And I'm going to tell you how. All right, so after you have written down, my dream sex would be all of the adjectives, the words that would describe your dream sexual experience. Hold nothing back. Now we're going to make the bridge. So, I am not much of a sports fan. I will tell you that much. I'm not much of a sports fan. But I have discovered there's a way to describe different types of sex that works well with sports analogies. So right now, I'm going to describe to you 3 different types of sex that foster your relationship, okay? So the first thing we're going to describe is from baseball. Okay, in baseball, let's say that you are at your favorite baseball game, you're at your favorite team's game, and you are a diehard fan. You go to every game that you can think of. You watch the games on TV when they're on. You have all the outfits or whatever they have in baseball, uniforms. You have all of the things, okay? So you're a diehard fan. You are committed to this team. So you go to a game one day, and your team is starting to lose. And then they're starting to lose worse. And then they're really far behind. They have not made enough hoops or whatever is in baseball. Hockey pucks, runs. They have not made enough of those points systems. And so, what do you do as a fan? There's a hint on the screen. Do you all know what this is? Yes, the rally cap. So, as a committed fan who is committed to your team, who is enthusiastic to the end, you aren't leaving early to beat traffic. You're going to stay to the end of the 9th or 8th or whatever it is innings, right? You're going to stay to the end. So you put on your hat inside out and backwards, like so. which proves your dedication to your team. You are committed. Okay? In your sex life, there may be times when you really don't feel like having sex, but because you are committed to the team, because you are part of something bigger, you put on your rally cap and you stay to the end, okay? Don't get me wrong here. This is not sex when you really don't want to, and this is not non-consensual sex. Let me be very clear in that. This is when you're kind of pretty tired, you're not really sure if you want to do it, but you know your partner is really looking forward to connecting intimately with you. So you put on your rally cap, and you're committed to the team, and that is rally sex, okay? The important part about rally sex that we need to remember is that rally sex fosters commitment in your relationship. Rally sex fosters commitment in your relationship. Hold on to that thought. We're going to come back to that, possibly. The next type of sex we're going to talk about has a tennis analogy. I'm just as equally bad at tennis as I am with baseball, but it's a good analogy. So think about if you're watching a tennis match and you have two players that are equally matched in skill, in desire, in athleticism, in the want for the game and the love of the game. And when you have those two players who are volleying back and forth, they're so equally matched in enthusiasm that nobody even scores a point. And it's just a joy to watch them volley. And when nobody scores a point in tennis, what is it called? Love, love. Isn't that beautiful? It's my favorite part of tennis. I love love. So when nobody scores a point and everybody is equally matched in intensity and enthusiasm and athleticism, it's called love, love. And that, in your sex life, fosters intimacy. When you are both in the moment, you're both enthusiastic with the same amount of desire for what's going to happen, it's intimate. So love, love, sex fosters intimacy. So rally sex fosters commitment. Love, love, sex fosters intimacy. Okay? Now, there's a third type of sex. You guys, I love the Olympics. I love the Olympics. Every 4 years, I become a raging downhill skiing fan. You would think that I knew everything there was to know about downhill skiing. I am in it. I'm yelling at the television. I watch every single airing of downhill skiing. I am like the coach beyond all coaches. I love the Olympics. I'm excited about the Olympics, and I enjoy watching the Olympics and getting so excited about the Olympics. And you know why? Because it happens every 4 years. Oh, that second wave of laughter is because you know I'm about to make a sex analogy. So you have Olympic sex, right? Dun, 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 dun. Trust me, this was not earned because I'm an athlete. This was earned probably for like citizenship or good grades or something. So Olympic sex is when things are really heated and they're really heavy and they're really exciting and there's like clothes flying everywhere and everybody's really into it, and sometimes it's over really quickly and sometimes it lasts a really long time, or sometimes it's in a place that's unusual, or sometimes it's, with extra added things going on like food or extra clothes or costumes or whatever it is. It's Olympic sex. It's really fun and it's really wild and it's really exciting. And it happens very rarely. The reason why it's fun and exciting and so intense is because it's rare. So Olympic sex is also great sex because it fosters excitement in your relationship. So you have commitment, you have intimacy, and you have excitement. Okay? What I want you to hear right now is that the only type of sex that we see on TV, on Friends, on whatever you're watching or whatever you're hearing about on the face of Cosmo magazine, everything says that if you're not having this type of sex, something's wrong with you. And that could not be farther from the truth. So what happens when we have a society that only fosters this one type of sex? We lose intimacy and we lose commitment. And that's what I want to give back to you. I want to give back to you permission to enjoy the rally, permission to enjoy that intimate, permission to understand that not every sexual experience has to be swinging from the chandeliers. So, if you have rally sex that fosters commitment, very good. You have love sex that fosters intimacy. And you have Olympic sex that fosters, very good. You're all certified sexologists. Way to go. Very good. So in life, we go through phases where we kind of navigate through these types of sex. Lots of times at the very beginning of a relationship, for example, you don't have a whole lot of intimate connection yet, and maybe you don't have commitment, but you can have really exciting Olympic sex. And maybe towards the middle of a relationship, maybe when you have kids, you're more in the rally sex field. And sometimes you move from, at the beginning of a sexual experience, rally sex into intimate sex, or intimate sex into Olympic sex. So it's fluid. It's a movement that's fluid. Okay? Give yourself permission to be okay with the other types of sex. The world will tell us that those types of sex aren't okay, and I want you to know right now that all of those types of sex for your relationship are great. Okay, so now we have become aware of how we feel about sex, where we want to go in our sex life, a description of the 3 types of sex that we are or are not having. Now we're going to deconstruct a little bit. We're going to deconstruct some of those sexual messages that we have been given growing up, from our parents, from our teachers at school, from our cousin Vinny. What were the sexual messages that somebody has told you, and what are the sexual messages that you believe for yourself to be true? What are the sexual messages that society tells us? Have you ever wondered why sex makes babies and babies can be the death blow to sex? Why is that? You know, we've been given this beautiful ability to create life through sexual experiences. What a beautiful gift we've been given. And then after we create that life, the sex dies. So we're going to explore that right now. We are going to deconstruct this. So, this is one of the things that I see most in my practice is people, and especially women, struggling with arousal, low libido, okay? So if you hear nothing else from what we talk about today, here's the big takeaway. Here is a big takeaway that can be very, very helpful for your relationship, okay? Are you ready? Yeah. The biggest killer of arousal is responsibility. The biggest killer of arousal is responsibility. And that's why sex makes babies, and babies can often mean the end of sex, or at least the end of sex for a while. Because there is no bigger responsibility than what? Caring for a child, raising an infant. I don't know if you know this, you have to keep those things alive day after day. They eat all the time, constantly needing attention. I have twins who are 5 now, but when they were little, as in infants, there was nothing else I could even concentrate on. So responsibility is the biggest killer of arousal. So if you think about when you feel more or less like having sex, it probably has to do with the amount of responsibilities you have in your life. So go back to the beginning, think back to the beginning of your relationship. When you first started engaging in sexual experiences, you probably had a few less responsibilities than you do now. And so sex probably came a little bit easier to you, or at least arousal came easier to you. So when we think in terms of responsibility or the things that clog our mind up, men and women tend to be different. So I'm going to talk in terms of men and women, but please know that this isn't across the board. Sometimes it's switched. Sometimes women feel the way I'm about to describe, and sometimes men feel the way I'm about to describe for women. Okay, so in general, this is just in generalities. This is how I like to describe how we, as people, deal with our responsibilities. So I like to say that men are like waffles, and women are like pancakes. You have all the analogies today. Men are like waffles, women are like pancakes. So when it comes to dealing with our responsibilities, dealing with all of the things that we have to do in our life, raising kids, dealing with our parents, doing our job correctly, being a good citizen, dealing with the laundry, dealing with the dishes, paying all the bills, making sure you have money to pay all the bills. Okay, all of these things clog up our brain and inhibit our ability to become aroused. For men typically, psychologically, have a better ability to do what we call in the psychology world, compartmentalize. Okay? So if you were to pour syrup on a waffle, you could decide which little squares you wanted to put the syrup in, right? You could put, work in this square, and sex in this square, and kids in this square, and golf in this square, and hockey in this square. I don't know. But you can put whatever you're thinking about, your responsibilities, and compartmentalize them very neatly to where when you're doing one thing, you're engrossed in one thing. And this is a very good skill to have for a lot of different reasons. And men typically, not across the board, but typically, are a bit better at compartmentalizing like a waffle. Whereas women, the way we deal with responsibilities is more like a pancake. So if you're pouring syrup on a pancake, you can't decide where it goes. It literally goes everywhere. So if your syrup represents your responsibilities, you're thinking about the kids and work and that fight you had with your mother-in-law and all of the things all at once, all the time. This is like mother tasking. Okay? And this is good in some cases. This can be helpful in some cases, like keeping a whole bunch of irons in the fire or juggling things. But specifically for sex, it actually works against us as women. Because we need the ability to remove the responsibilities from our brain in order to have the freedom to express ourselves sexually for both men and women. But men seem to have a better or easier time using this term of compartmentalizing. So what I have done in my work is I saw all of these things happening. I saw the low arousal. I saw shame surrounding your sex life. I saw painful intercourse happening. I saw guilt. People would come to me with intense communication issues surrounding their sex life. So I thought there has to be a better way. There has to be some way that we can set up a framework that helps us describe sex and sexuality in a way that makes sense and is easy to talk about. We just don't have the ways in which to talk about sex very effectively. So I was going through my behavior change models, and I was trying to fit sex into a behavior change model, and nothing was really gelling or working, or things became too complicated. Then I came across Abraham Maslow, who is one of my favorites of the psychological greats. Psychological greats? So Maslow's hierarchy of needs is something that's been around for a long time. Has anybody taken Psych 101 and seen this before? Yeah, so it should look fairly familiar. It's a very simple, easy way to describe the needs that we have in our society in order to grow as humans. And the way in which we move throughout the pyramid can describe how we are doing in life. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs starts at the bottom with physiological. Can somebody yell out and tell me what in the world the basic necessities of life would be? Food, yep. Food, water, sleep. Those are basic physiological needs that one would need to just simply live, not even to thrive, but just simply live the next minute, the next hour, the next day, the next week. Okay, these are the things that we need just to be alive. So one rung up from that is safety. Can somebody give me an example of what the needs of safety are? Yeah, shelter, absolutely. You have a place to go to get out of the elements. You have clothes on your back to make sure that you are not getting sunburned. You feel safe in a community of people. You don't feel like you're being chased by a lion every day. So you have those elements of safety. So those are basically the physiological, tangible needs that we have, and they're always at the bottom, okay? And we see this in the way we interact with people or the way we want to influence people. We must meet people's needs physiologically before they will allow us to meet their needs psychologically, okay? So when you move up the ladder, after we've met our needs physiologically, we have physiological air, food, water, shelter, safety. We move up to love and belonging. So once you have those bottom two rungs taken care of, you can look at how do you feel and receive love. Do you feel like you belong in a community? Do you fit in? Do you understand social capacity? Do you feel taken care of? Okay, so we're starting to get into psychological needs, emotional needs, love, belonging. Up one from that is esteem. Esteem. Do you feel good at certain things? I feel really good playing the violin. I feel really good at leading out in worship. I feel very good at my ability to be a parent. I feel good at my ability to read. I feel good about how I eat or how I look or a bunch of different things. So you must have all of those bottom rungs to feel good about who you are and the things that you do as a person. I feel good. I feel worthy. And at the very top is self-actualization. And Abraham Maslow kind of described this as this ethereal place that not very many people reach. But it's a place where you are in understanding of the concept of choice, and that your choices today affect your choices tomorrow, and that you are in charge of your own destiny. So that's how he described it. And we're going to describe it a little bit differently in a second when we get to the sexual hierarchy of needs. So what I did was I chose Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I decided to just lay over a filter of sexuality so we could have better, more thorough, more educated dialogue and conversation about how sex is conducted within our relationships and within society as a whole. And once I did this, it was like a light went off. I think God gave me this weird thing one day, like 4 or 5 years ago, and I just said, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's what I gotta do. So we layered over a filter of sex, and I started to write out and describe what it would mean to describe sex in terms of these different layers. And it turned out to be beautiful. So let me describe it to you. When I went out to discover a framework or a theory or a dialogue, I decided I wanted to take the healthiest version of sex that I could find in the Bible and put that as paramount, right? So Song of Solomon, Song of Songs, was my ultimate goal. This was a description of the healthiest version of intimacy that I could find in the Bible. So I realized when I layered sex over Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I had figured it out. I have figured out a way to speak to all the complexities of sex while still keeping a spiritual end goal. I was excited too, I know. So let's start at the bottom. Physiological sex. So physiological sex is all of the things that one would do to have sex. It's all the very basic biological mechanics. So you have just the basics of positions, of what happens physically to two people, conception, penis goes in the vagina, all of those very basic 5th grade things that we teach. That is on the bottom rung of physiological sex. Is it important? Absolutely. You have to know these things to figure out how to have sex in general. Up from there, safe and consensual sex. So we do a pretty good job of talking about what sex is, like what it looks like in a very anatomical way, in a very biological way. And we do a pretty good job in society in general of talking about sex in terms of safety and consent. You know, we want to have consensual sex. We want to be sure people are safe when they have sex. So we do a pretty good job of talking about that. So most people, by the time they are sexually active, know kind of what sex is biologically and how to engage in safe and consensual sex. The sad part is, in our society, we don't have conversations that elevate above the bottom 2 rungs. We don't have conversations that go beyond safe and consensual. Don't get me wrong. Are those items important? Absolutely. They're paramount. They're important. We need safe and consensual sex, right? We need to feel like you are in a sexual relationship where you can get vulnerable. That's safety within your own relationship. Not just safe sex as in preventing STIs, but safe sex within your own relationship. That your partner can feel vulnerable with you. Those are all very important things. But there is so much more. And we've never had a way to describe the more of sex. How does love interact with sex? How does God interact with sex? What are spiritual implications? What am I going after? How is this fostering my relationship? So we just had this basic, very rudimentary conversation going in our society and in our church and in our families about the very bottom rungs of sex. So I wanted to elevate the conversation. Let's have bigger, better conversations about your dream sex, right? I've had tons and tons of clients in my office. I ask each and every one to do exactly the exercise that I had you do earlier. I have them write down, my dream ultimate sex would be, and I have had 0 people say, my dream ultimate sexual experience would be safe and consensual. Because that's so low on the dialogue, it's a given. And yet, we have no ability to elevate beyond safe and consensual. I wouldn't say no ability. We have the ability. We don't often do it. We don't take the opportunity. So let's do it now, right, don't we? Right? Okay, so above safety, we have love and belonging. Okay? So if you have met those bottom 2 rungs, you can start to feel love and like you belong in this relationship. Like you have the capacity to give love and you have the capacity to receive love. One up from that is sexual worth, and this is a big thing that I talk about. with my clients and with my classes and in experiences like this. You feel worthy of pleasure, worthy of experiencing joy, worthy of making a beautiful experience with your partner, that you can provide it and you can receive it. And that's sometimes really difficult, especially if we have grown up with messages that sex is dirty, or that we should be ashamed of our sex life, or that we should not express ourselves sexually to our partners, to our spouses. So it's really difficult to find sexual worth when we grow up with some of these negative messages. And then at the very top, and this is one of the things I'm most excited about, I realized that in the Bible, when the writer says he knew her, the phrase to know is used so many times in the Bible to express a very intimate relationship. And I realized at the top of my pyramid was the knowing. When you meet all of the other needs, you are able to intimately know your partner. You are able to intimately know God. You are able to intimately know yourself. So the knowing that happens so often, and that is the pinnacle of the healthy sex that I saw in the Bible, that was at the very top of my pyramid, and it was right there. And it was the one thing we strive to get to. And it just all came together so beautifully here. So now we have really this beautiful framework for which to dialogue with our partners about sex, to talk about where we struggle. Are we struggling with just the physiological part? And sometimes we do. It's painful, or you can't get an erection, or you don't feel aroused. Some of those very basic physiological pieces need to be addressed before you can move up. But maybe you have the bottom two things down, but you feel a lack of love or belonging. You feel like you don't belong in a sexual relationship with your partner, with your spouse. Maybe you are dealing with things like sexual worth. You find it hard to speak up about your needs, wants, and desires because you don't feel worthy of them. So we're always moving up the pyramid towards the knowing, towards sexual actualization. So when we take our mindset, so we figure out how we think about sex, how we think about our future sex, and we add behaviors to them, then we can truly change. It takes both. I like to say in sex and in life, where the mind goes, the body will follow. So most of my work has to do with helping people understand sex mentally and emotionally, and the body follows. So now we're going to talk about some of those behaviors. One of my favorite researchers is Brené Brown, who talks in depth about vulnerability. And we know from her work and people from before her that getting vulnerable is the way that we move forward with growth and change in our life. Getting vulnerable is the way we move forward with growth and change. And that's the really hard part, right? Because we have to feel safe. We have to feel taken care of. We have to feel like we belong. We have to feel worthy in order to get vulnerable. Okay, so it's kind of this loop. But if we want to move up the pyramid, we have to get vulnerable and try things that take risk. So the next part of what we're going to talk about before we do question and answers is some of those behaviors that we can engage in to get vulnerable and move up the pyramid to the knowing. Are we okay with that? All right. Are you all doing okay? You're the most important people in this room, so if you're not doing okay, you got to tell me. All right. Let's talk about getting vulnerable. So taking a look back about where are you stuck? Have you thought about it? Is it low libido? Is it a disconnect in communication with your partner? Is it feeling sexually frustrated? Is it you feel like your partner is not showing up for sex? Are you having less sex than you want? Are you having more sex than you want? Although that doesn't happen very often. I don't get those calls, at least. What's happening in your relationship? Where are you stuck? Let's work together to move you forward, to move you through some of those impasses so you can make a bridge from where sex is for you currently and where you want to go. Maybe it's a simple thing. Maybe it's something you've struggled with for years and years and years. But today is the day you take a tiny step forward. Esther Perel is a very famous marriage and family therapist who did a study of over 52 countries and thousands of people. She asked them, when are you most attracted to your partner? When are you most drawn to your partner? She asked this because she had a theory, and I'll tell you that theory after I tell you the answer. So most people say, I am most drawn to my partner, and I don't mean sexually, I just mean attracted to them. Most people say they are most drawn to their partner when they are independent of us. I am most drawn to my partner when I see them playing their trumpet. I am most drawn to my partner when I see her holding court. I am most drawn to my partner when I see them playing with our children and engaging with our children. I am most drawn to my partner when they're in a social situation telling a joke that's hilarious. They have just this uncanny ability to do. And most of the time, we are most drawn to our partners when they are independent of us, doing something that is in their flow. Does that make sense? Yeah? So I want you to think for a second, and you can even write it down, and I want you to talk about this later with your partner. I am most drawn to you when, and then fill in the blank. I bet you will find it is something that they are good at and that they don't need you for. And here's the key to that. If we know that responsibility is the biggest killer of arousal, we are most drawn to our partners when we are not responsible for them. You follow me there? We are most drawn to our partners when they are independent of us, when they sit in their own strength, and when they do things that maybe we aren't so good at, that they don't need us for. We are drawn to each other when you want each other, not when you need each other. Here's a good example. Think about two magnets and the energy that's fostered between the two of them, a north and a south. When you have the magnets that are way out here, can you feel the energy between them? No, they're too far apart. They're too independent, right? But then when you bring the magnets together and they clasp together, can you feel the pull then? They're too enmeshed. They are not independent enough, right? So the energy of magnets and your relationship happen in the space. So when you pull those magnets apart just enough, you can barely keep them steady. There's so much fire, so much energy between those magnets because you have given them space to be themselves, but not so much that they become marooned. Does that make sense? So the magic of a relationship, of a sex life, is in the space that you give each other to foster that energy. So when are you most drawn to your partner? When are you most drawn to your partner? I want you to think about it, and I want you to talk about it, because it feels good. It feels really good to hear when our spouse is most attracted to us, right? It feels really good. So I want you to talk about that later, too. And I also want you to share with your spouse, your partner, the activity that we did at the beginning. The sex is, and I want sex to be. And since we've worked on giving you the tools, you can talk about how to get there. So let's talk about some more of those behaviors. Why in the world does she have a microwave and a crock pot on the screen here? So a mentor of mine once said, men are like microwaves, women are like crock pots. When it comes to sex, women need a little more time. They need a little more time to warm up, to get in the mood, to get aroused. Men don't need as much time. The interesting thing about this is that we speak about arousal on a male scale. This is nothing, no fault of your own. This is just society in general. So we speak in terms of arousal on a male scale. So when we try and define in the sexology community, when we try and define the stages of arousal and desire and try and look at it effectively, we are now starting to realize that we need to make one scale for women and one scale for men. Because right now we're comparing apples to oranges, right? So men, we'll put men over here, men get aroused in one certain way, women get aroused in a different kind of way. Neither is good, neither is bad. But when we compare one with the other, you end up placing subversively the other group in a precarious situation. So I have lots of people come to my office and say, I just don't want to have as much sex as my husband does, right? I don't feel aroused, I don't feel like having sex. Well, that's because you work on a completely different scale. So we have this whole kind of group of women that we have placed with the label of low libido, when really their scale is different. So, for example, if we measured men on a female scale, lots of men would be placed with a label of hyperlibido, right? So, we need to look at these scales differently. We need to look at the mechanisms of arousal differently. Men are like microwaves, women are like crock pots. Men take an average of 2 to 3 minutes to get fully aroused. Women take, on average, 13 to 20. It's amazing that we even have sex at all ever. This is one of the things that I hope you remember from today. Men and women are different in this regard. Sex erases problems for men. Problems erase sex for women. I see this going on. Yeah, sex erases problems for men, problems erase sex for women. So this can help describe a lot of things that go on in relationships. So people will come into my office, a couple will come into my office and say, well, he says, I didn't know we were fighting. I mean, we had sex that night, so I thought everything was okay. And she says, I can't believe he wanted to have sex when we were still fighting. Right? So sex erases problems for men, problems erase sex for women. So how do we come to kind of this mutual agreement, right? If we want to have enjoyable sex, we try and work on the problem, or at least table the problem, until it can be worked out, and agree upon when the sex is going to happen and what it's going to look like. So here's a technique that I like to suggest for dealing with the issues of low libido, of low arousal. When all of those responsibilities kind of get in the way of you really enjoying your sex life. So this is what I call the responsibility jar. And this is something that I suggest for clients to do to help with issues of low libido. So we know that responsibility is the biggest killer of low libido. So we have to figure out how to manage our responsibilities better so that we can really show up fully and engage fully in our sex life. So a responsibility jar is just a clear container, it can look like a ball jar or whatever, that you place somewhere you will pass on the way to the bedroom. Place it somewhere on the way to the bedroom, so that when you pass this responsibility jar, it is your mental check-in to go, okay, I'm checking in. I understand that I'm thinking about all the responsibilities that I have to do. Those are not going to serve me in my sex life, so I'm choosing to release them mentally into this jar. Now fill it up with things like shells or glass beads or something that is very beautiful, because your responsibilities are beautiful. We're not trying to diminish the fact that you have these in your brain. We're just trying to help them keep in a place that doesn't interfere with your sex life. So you take a big deep breath in, think about those responsibilities, and as you exhale, think about them going into the responsibility jar. So this is just a very simple exercise that you can use for all kinds of things. If you need to focus, on one specific task, you can release the other tasks into the jar. You may find that prayer or meditation or some other form of brain release works better for you. Whatever you need to do, remember your responsibilities are one of the biggest keys to or losing your responsibilities are one of the biggest keys to unlocking that arousal within your bedroom. So another thing I talk to couples about is the actual environment. So as a health educator, as a sexual health educator, we're really interested in all the facets of a behavior, right? So your environment really matters. It really matters. So in your bedroom, do you have a TV? Do you have piles of laundry? Sometimes our master bedrooms tend to be the big closet of our house, right? Because our guests tend to not go in there, so it kind of ends up being a catch-all for the stuff of the house. But this really interferes more than you know with your ability to become vulnerable and let go in the bedroom. So if you have the TV, remove the TV. If you have a work desk, try and move it outside of your bedroom. If you have piles of laundry stacked up, get them out. Because you don't want anything to interfere with your ability to become aroused, your ability to find that beautiful sexual space. So here's a little thing that you can remember. As you go throughout your bedrooms tonight, because I know you're all going to do this, go to your bedroom, pick out every single thing that's in your bedroom. And if it doesn't help you feel sleepy or sexy, it doesn't belong in your bedroom. So if it doesn't help you feel sleepy or sexy, take it out. And if you have to remove the pictures of the kids or the dog or whatever it is, if it doesn't help you feel sleepy or sexy, take it out. I want to give you permission to create a space in your life for the super fuel of your relationship. This is your carte blanche to do the things that you've always wanted to do. Make that beautiful bedroom, create that space that's just for you to connect intimately, to connect in a committed way, to connect in an excited way. This is for you to do. Another tip or trick or tool that I encourage my clients to do is to schedule sex. So I know what you might be thinking. Celeste, I don't want to schedule sex. That sounds incredibly unspontaneous. And you would be correct. It is not spontaneous. And I would venture to guess that there actually is no such thing as spontaneous sex. And you can quote me on that, and I will take that to my grave, because I hear this all the time. I want sex to be more spontaneous, right? There's no such thing as spontaneous sex. So I can relieve you of that pressure to have spontaneous sex, because guess what? Spontaneous sex would be you walking down the sidewalk, and all of a sudden you're having sex. Let me tell you, that would not be fun. Okay? There is no such thing as spontaneous sex. Now, there is such a thing as anticipating sex. There is such a thing as anticipated sex. So, when you think back to the beginning of your relationship, this is what people usually do. I want sex to be like it was the beginning of our relationship. Okay, cool. We can do that. So, at the beginning of your relationship, you probably knew sex was going to happen on certain times or dates or places, right? You probably shaved your legs or put on you flipped your boxers inside out and backwards, the clean side. Whatever you did to indicate that you were going to be prepared for sex, right? So really, truly, at the beginning of your relationship, sex might have been on the mind more, you anticipated it more, and that built that excitement, that anticipation, right? That feeling of, I don't know what's gonna happen, it might be crazy, I don't know, I'm just excited to be together. That's what you wanna foster. You don't wanna do spontaneous sex. You want to anticipate beautiful connections, right? And so some interesting phenomena happens as we age and grow with our partners, is that we move from anticipating sex to feeling anxious about sex. So we move from anticipating sex to feeling anxious about sex. Now, I used to love going on roller coasters until I became a parent and they give me a big headache. But I used to love going on roller coasters. And one of the best parts about going on a roller coaster is waiting in line with your friends. Watching everybody, whoa, screaming and going crazy and being excited about the roller coaster, and standing in line, even if it was for an hour in the heat at Six Flags in Texas or whatever. The part that was almost the most fun was anticipating the ride, right? So how do we foster this anticipation in our sex life so we can anticipate the ride and build that energy between our magnets? Scheduling sex. Now it starts to make sense, right? If you know, sex is going to happen Thursday night, you can do what it takes to get your mind there. You can do what it takes to build anticipation, to remove some of those responsibilities, right? And it also relieves anxiety about if it's going to happen or not, right? It relieves anxiety about if it's going to happen or not. So building anticipation is one of the biggest things that you can do for your relationship. Pastor Roberts was talking this morning about chemistry. Building that chemistry. Chemistry is something that you can recreate over and over and over in your relationship. You just have to know how. You just have to have the tools. So let me tell you a story about two women. These two women were super excited about going to the Maldives. They really wanted to go to the Maldives. So they each had Maldives keychains. They had this dream board on the Maldives. They both have Pinterest boards that had everything they would need for the Maldives, cute suits and what they were going to do and the beaches they wanted to visit and all of the things. They were so excited to go to the Maldives. We'll call her over here Petunia. Petunia. Super excited to go to the Maldives. She's been thinking about this forever. She's been thinking about this since the day she got a job. Tulip, excited about the Maldives, been thinking about it forever, ever since she got a job. The only difference between these two women is that Petunia has not purchased a plane ticket or a hotel, and Tulip has purchased a plane ticket and a hotel. So Petunia experiences anxiety, and Tulip experiences anticipation. Two identical women, two identical stories, two very different outcomes. Petunia is anxious that she will never get there, and Tulip is excited and anticipating her trip. So this is what you can do in your relationship. You can build that anticipation. You can build that excitement. You can foster that by buying the plane ticket. And if that means you put it in your calendar under crochet class or whatever you need to put it under to hide it from whomever you want to hide it from. Do it. Talk about it. Even if it's just a conversation you have at the beginning of the week. Hey, so Thursday, you're off work and I get home at 5. Why don't we have some sex or intimate time before the kids come over for dinner? Or, hey, Saturday afternoon, the kids are going to their grandparents' house. Let's connect. Let's reconnect. So that way, the whole week, you're sending texts. I can't wait for Saturday. Hey, I got some new lingerie. I can't wait to show it to you. Or, I'm so excited. I have been trying to get everything on my to-do list finished so I can really show up for us sexually. So I can really foster our sexual commitment. So I can really move us, and we can move together toward the knowing. Everybody has what we call in the sexology community a sexual script. Okay? What in the world is a sexual script, Celeste? So a sexual script is something that you do to indicate to your partner that you would like to have sex. So for some people, for lots of people, a sexual script may start with breast massage or a foot massage or maybe, cuddling in bed. Sexual scripts start with all kinds of things. Maybe a sexual script starts with like a hair, braiding hair or something like that. Some sexual scripts may start with, hey, baby, I brushed my teeth. I hope that is not the beginning of your sexual script, but if it is, hey, you do you, my friend. But everybody has a sexual script, and it changes as you age. But if you were to think right now, you could probably come up with certain activities or moves that you or your partner do to indicate to each other that you're interested in sex. So my challenge to you is to use the tools we have talked about today to up-level your sexual script. How can you move towards more love and belonging in your sexual script? How can you move more towards sexual worth? How can you move more towards sexual actualization in your sexual script? Sometimes all people need is to flip around their sexual script. So talking about somebody initiating that doesn't usually initiate sex. Maybe it's doing something different for a sexual script. Sexual scripts are ingrained in us, and they can be almost limiting. Here's an example. So I worked very closely at the beginning of my career with a community of women who'd gone through cancer diagnosis and treatment. So gynecological cancers, breast cancer. So part of my work with them was to help these women redefine and rewrite their sexual script after having a full mastectomy. What happens to my sex life and my sexuality if my sexual script starts with breast massage and now I have no breasts? What happens to my sexual script now that I have a colostomy bag? What happens to my sexual script now that I experience back pain, or now that I'm confined to a wheelchair? What about if I just am so tired? What about if your sexual script has always started with hair twirling, and now my hair is gone? Okay, so in our life, we have to define and redefine our sexual scripts over and over and over again. And a healthy couple can do this. They can navigate those sexual scripts. They can figure out how to rearrange and redefine these things. So my challenge to you is to remove responsibilities, build anticipation, build that energy between the two magnets, and redefine your sexual script. Rewrite it. There's nothing that says you can't rewrite your sexual script over and over and over again as we age. Rewrite it. The best sex maybe is to come for you. Maybe it's in your future. So the last thing I want to talk about is how to use these things to move up the ladder. So we have dialogue in our society that focuses on physiological sex, that focuses on safe sex and consent. How do we move up? We get vulnerable. We try new things. We talk. We have conversations. You can be really surprised at what an intimate, direct conversation about sex can do for your marriage. Find a list of sex questions. Ask each other sex questions. You may figure out something that you've never known before. Ask your partner what they do and don't like. Ask your partner if this is good or if this is good. Keep asking. Keep telling. One thing that I like to do when I would have groups of women who had gone through a full mastectomy or partial mastectomy, when they were redefining their sexual script, I was talking to them about trying something new, getting vulnerable. And I would say, here's an idea. To rediscover all of those places on your body that are still erogenous, not just your breast, the other places on your body that are very erogenous. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to blindfold your husband, and I want you to put some powdered, flavored powder on your body. And I want you to put this flavored powder on your body where you want to be kissed in 4 places. So put the flavored powder on your body, 4 places where you want to be kissed. Blindfold your husband and say, husband, I have put some delicious powder on my body in 5 places. When she really only put it on 4. Oh, we're getting there. It's slow, but we're getting there. So try something new. Try something a little bit out of your comfort zone. Try something to be a little bit vulnerable. And that will give you the confidence to try a little bit more, to see if you can build that anticipation, see if you can build the energy between the two of you. And before long, you will start to move up this ladder, and you'll start to see your sexual worth becoming stronger, and it will get easier and more fun to keep doing these things, and you'll build momentum. My ideal for you is that you reach at times in your life through commitment, through intimacy, and through excitement, you reach the knowing, where you know your partner intimately, where you know the connection that you have is special, where you connect on a physical level, on a sexual level that makes sense only for the two of you. That's my hope and my dream for you. And that's what I think God wanted for us. Sex is a creative process. We literally call it making love. We don't call it having love. It's making love. It's a creative process. At times in our life, you're literally creating life. So make sex creative, okay? Move up the ladder towards the knowing. See how far you can go. It'll be a great journey, and it'll be a worthy journey. At this time, I'm going to have some people pass out some anonymous question cards, or maybe you already have them. So I want to turn the rest of the time over to you, okay? I want to answer your questions. If you've ever wanted to ask a sexologist anything, now's the time to do it, okay? So I'm going to have these papers being passed out. If there is a place for you to put your name and email address, if you would like for me to contact you, I can do that. But if you just want a truly anonymous question, please write your question down, and then we'll gather them all up, and I'll answer as many as I can in the time that we have. I'm happy to stay after and talk to anybody who wants to chat. If there's something that's going on in your life that you feel like, I just don't have the tools to deal with this right now, let's chat about it. I might not have the answers, but I can help you come up with resources to have the answers. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time to write down any questions you may have, and then I'm going to answer as many questions as I can in the time we have. And we have a good amount of time left, so hopefully I'll be able to answer quite a few questions. So I think the question cards are coming out now. So you can ask any questions about any of the rungs on the sexual hierarchy of needs. You can ask questions in general about sex. You can ask questions about relationships. You can ask questions about your kids, how to talk to your kids and at what age. We will have a session tomorrow about how to raise sexually healthy children. So if that's something you want to learn more about, there will be a full hour-long session tomorrow about that. If you need ideas, I can give you ideas about how to get vulnerable. If you have a health issue that impedes with your sex life, let's talk about that. That's a lot of the work that I do, is helping people navigate sex through disease, which is a really fun part of my job. Like chronic pain, knee pain, diabetes, interactions with medications I'm okay at. Just really anything you want. I would love for everybody to submit a card, even if you don't write anything on it, because it helps us remain anonymous. And if you don't want to put your name, you certainly don't have to. You can just write a question, or if you just want to write your name, I can put you in my database for an email newsletter. Again, I want to make this about you. I want to meet your needs. So I've talked a lot about the things that I want to talk about. Now let's talk about the things that you want to talk about. So go ahead and write a question, and I'll answer as many of those as I can. I appreciate you all coming out tonight, becoming vulnerable, being willing to talk about sex. I appreciate it. So I hope some good questions are coming up in your mind. And then we'll have some people, you can go ahead and put them in, I believe, offering plates, which is awesome. We're just going to leave all the sex questions in the offering plates for the treasurer. I'm kidding, we're not going to do that. I just want you to feel very comfortable here. It's a safe space. I'm not going to read your name out loud. It's a safe space to ask the questions that you need to ask. What have you always wanted to know? And if we have at least a few questions already gathered up, I'll go ahead and start answering those. Thank you. May I have an offering plate just to put them up here? Thank you very much. Perfect. Thank you so much. We'll get started now that we have a few. Oh, there was $1 in there. Is that for me? I'll take it. Thank you. All right, y'all. You remember I'm from Texas, right? Deep South. Okay. We're just going to go ahead and start. Feel free to go if you have some responsibilities or you just can't wait to get home and get it on. That's fine with me too. I would encourage that. Thank you. And if I could just have, if I could steal that one too. Oh, $5. The bills are getting bigger.
Oh, yeah.
Can I just have the offering plate?
You have the money, and I'll keep the plate.
No, I need an offering plate. There we go. Thank you. Okay, now we're good. This is so exciting. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, any extras, if you don't mind just putting an offering plate down there, and I don't want to mix the ones up with the ones I already have. Thank you. Okay, here we go. Are you guys excited? Okay. Don't lose a message. Okay, what do you do if you are experiencing ED, which is erectile dysfunction? No erection at all. How do you have sex? Doctors have not been able to help. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, we can just put all, if you guys just want to dump them up, and I'll just keep talking. All right, strategies for erectile dysfunction. Okay, so erectile dysfunction happens for several different reasons. One is physiologically and one is psychologically, and you can have a combination of both. Did it say you were on any medications? No. So I would probably ask you more questions about medications you are on. You probably talked to your doctor about that already. But if it's a physiological, if it's a more of a mental issue, if you ever wake up with an erection, or if you can get an erection at all at any time, then we would need to discuss what's going on psychologically to help you match your physiological ability to your mental ability, okay? If you aren't getting an erection at all, we would talk about how to broaden your sexual activities, okay? So Marty Klein is a very famous Dr. Marty Klein is a very famous sexologist, and he did a bunch of research on what most people want out of their sex lives, and what most people indicate that they want is a combination of pleasure and closeness. Most people want out of their sex life a combination of pleasure and closeness. And what happens is we have become a society that's very orgasm-focused, right? We're very focused on the end goal of having an orgasm. Sex isn't good unless I have an orgasm. And erection comes along with that. And we've also got a lot of societal expectations about what makes a virile man, what makes a man a man. And erection is one of those things. So, talking about how to expand your definition of what good sex is can be very helpful. So you may be able to, if you're not able to have an erection anymore, which you maybe could, we would have to talk about that, depending on what's going on. If you're not able to have an erection anymore, let's see how you can still feel sexually satisfied and satisfy your spouse or your partner without having an erection. Because if what most people want out of sex is not orgasm, is pleasure and closeness, can you still experience pleasure without an erection? Sure. Can you still experience closeness without an erection? Absolutely. So I do a lot of work with hospice, and I do a lot of work with the Alzheimer's Association, helping people connect intimately in later years, helping people redefine their sex life and their sexuality to help it still serve them even when some sexual activities come off the table. So think about expanding your definition of sex and what good sex is and how it serves your relationship. And if you truly aren't able to have an erection anymore, and I don't know exactly what's going on, so I couldn't tell you if you truly aren't able to have an erection anymore, expand your definition of sexuality so it includes things that help you still feel pleasure and closeness. How can I match my husband's sex drive? You can't. So you're two different people. You can't. It's okay, but that's okay. Because like we talked about before, judging a woman on a male scale of arousal is like comparing apples to oranges, okay? What's important is that you are having the sex as fulfilling for both of you. So frequency, there's probably a question about frequency in here. It's my most common question. Frequency is actually less important than authenticity. Okay? Frequency is often less important than authenticity. So men come into my practice a lot and they say, I would give up more sex for better sex. If I could have better sex, I would have less of it. I would be happy with less of it. So really showing up for the sex that you're having is more important than you think. And if you can really show up in an authentic way and really experience pleasure and closeness, two things will probably happen. You will become more satisfied for yourself, you will become more connected to your partner, and your partner will probably be more satisfied as well. So it's not about matching somebody else's sex drive. You're two completely different people. That would be impossible. It's about talking and communicating to meeting both of your needs, wants, and desires. Lots of times, if you focus on those as your goals, meeting each other's needs, wants, and desires, you will also want to have more sex because now you're getting fulfilled and you're getting the things out of sex that you want. Does that make sense? Kind of, sort of? Ha, look at this. It's like I planned it. How often should we have sex? How do I know if I'm pushing my wife for sex that is too often? You ask her. That's how you know. That's how you know. So again, frequency is the most common question. And when people ask me things like, how often do most healthy couples have sex? What they're really asking me is, am I okay? Am I okay? Are we okay? Or, I need some fodder to tell my spouse that we're doing it enough. Or, I need some proof that if I do it this many times, we'll be okay. And I can't give you that. Yes, there are averages out there. But if I tell you an average, if I told you a number, what would you immediately do? Compare. You would immediately compare yourself. Am I meeting it above, below, somewhere in the middle? Oh, phew. We must be okay because we're having sex this however many times. I don't care if you're having sex every hour or if you're having ABC sex, which is anniversaries, birthdays, and Christmas. It matters not to the success of your relationship. What matters is that you have agreed upon it and that you are authentically showing up. That's pretty much the rest of the thing. I don't know. Does that make sense? Do I need to re-explain? I'm happy to re-explain. We're talking about it some more. How do you repair the Adventist guilt about sex? How did you remedy your own situation? If you feel so inclined to say, well, I've said almost everything already, I might as well. So, guilt. Let's talk about guilt. I talk about shame a lot in the practice. So I have a lot of people who come in who experience shame around their sex life, as in, I feel ashamed for being sexual. I feel ashamed for not being sexual. I feel ashamed for having sex before I think I was supposed to. I feel ashamed for enjoying it. I feel ashamed for not enjoying it. I feel ashamed that I'm not as experienced as my partner. I feel ashamed that I am more experienced than my partner. There's so much shame that goes along with our sex life, and especially for women. And one of the process that I take these women through is similar to what we've done today as far as steps go. There's a lot more work one-on-one, but understanding where you are, I feel guilty about sex. I feel guilty about these aspects of sex. Understanding where you want to go. I want to feel free. I want to feel connected. I want to feel intimate. I want to feel pleasure without guilt, without shame. Okay? And then building the bridge through deconstruction and vulnerability. So how do you build a bridge from where you are in your sex life to where you want to go in your sex life? You deconstruct those messages. So If anybody feels comfortable, can you shout out a message that you got growing up, we'll say? And if you don't feel comfortable, I'll tell you one of mine. About sex. Something that somebody told you about sex. Any messages? It's dirty. Very good. Thank you. So sex is dirty. Now, people might not tell you in those specific words, but things like, slapping a kid's hand away when they're exploring their genitals, that sends a message that sex or your genitals are dirty. So we get these messages from our parents, from our community, from society as a whole about sex being dirty or sex being bad. And it's very difficult when you've grown up with all of those messages to flip that once you become sexually active in a institution that is accepted, like marriage. It's hard to flip that, and that's something that I went through, right? I didn't have sex until I got married, and then all of a sudden I'm supposed to be some vixen, like from 1 hour to the next. And it was very difficult, and I had a lot of guilt and shame around that. So I went through those processes. I became really aware of what I was feeling. I deconstructed those messages. I accepted the ones that still served me and still served to get me to that spiritual, biblical knowing, helped me get there, and I got rid of the rest of them. I got rid of the rest of those messages. I chose not to believe in those systems anymore. I deconstructed them. And I got vulnerable. That's the last step. I tried things. I explored sexuality within my relationship. I figured out what I liked, what I didn't like. So that's kind of how you do it. It's kind of a big process, but it's worth every step. And once you do these processes in this space that's very vulnerable, man, you can do them in any area, right? You can become aware of your eating or your fitness or whatever. You can deconstruct those messages about your eating. You can deconstruct those messages about your fitness. You can become vulnerable and try new things when it comes to eating. You can become vulnerable and try new things when it comes to exercising. This process of behavior change works for almost any behavior. Sorry, I can't read that one very well. You're doing great. You're hanging in there like champions, like absolute champions. How do I get over my feelings that I am not sexy? How do I get over my feelings that I am not sexy? So in our pyramid of sexual hierarchy of needs, sexual worth is that second to last rung, and it's a really difficult one, right? You can understand how sex works. You can have safe sex, consensual sex. You can even feel love and receive love in a healthy way and feel like you belong in a relationship. But when it comes to you feeling sexy or worthy, it's tough. So you are almost there. But it's tough. It's so tough to feel like you are worthy. And that really comes from those messages that you were given growing up, or those messages that you receive from society, that you should look a certain way, that you should shave your hair in a certain way, that you should do your makeup a certain way, that you should be a certain weight or whatever. So you're bombarded by these messages every day that you are not what you need, that you are not okay with how you are. So doing those deconstruction messages, understanding your worth in the eyes of God can be very helpful. Understanding your worth in the eyes of your partner can be very helpful. And then getting vulnerable, trying something new to understand that you are worthy as well. That's a tough one. Aha. How about if my husband is grumpy or not romantic and not helping me to be aroused? Yeah, being grumpy is not very sexy. So this is where the art of conversation is so beautiful. I love and I teach the process of NVC. Is anybody familiar with Rosenberg's process of NVC communication? Anybody? It's also called intentional communication. So it's a process of communicating where you take a lot of the emotion out of it, and it's a 4-step process. So let's give an example. Say my husband walks through the door and slams the door, or the door slams, and I say, "Why are you so mad?" Right? So in NVC, we use a 4-step process. So the first step is, instead of assuming or insinuating, you observe. You observe. So, hey, I noticed the door slammed quite hard. Okay, I'm not placing any blame. I'm not assuming anything. I'm just simply stating an observation that an alien from outer space could see had happened. Hey, I noticed the door slammed really hard. The second part is owning your own feelings about that. When the door slammed really hard, I felt a little uncomfortable, and I felt like maybe you were upset. So the third part, after you make an observation and you state your feelings, you do needs and requests. So, hey, when you get a chance to take off your scrubs, you think we could sit down and chat about your day? So I am owning all of this, right? I am not blaming him. I am not assuming he is angry, even though he probably was. But I am not putting him in a position to be defensive. So observations, feelings, needs, requests. So in sexual conversations, this is a great thing to do because it gives you the tools to ask for what you want without blaming or assuming anything about your partner. So my suggestion for you is to start talking about the grumpiness and start to own your own arousal. We are in charge of whether we get aroused or not ourselves. Your arousal is not your partner's responsibility. Can they help you with that? Absolutely, and I hope that they do. But your arousal is your own responsibility. So if we know that responsibility is the biggest killer of arousal, you try and figure out how to remove those things out of your life so you can find the space to become aroused. What do you recommend for virgins on their wedding night? Spanx? I'm just kidding. Fake eyelashes. I recommend that you talk a lot about sex before you have it. If you cannot talk about sex, you are not ready to have it. I feel really strongly about that. You have to talk about sex before you have it. Talk about sex, and then talk about sex ad nauseum again. Have a lubricant, and go slow. What can be done to reduce pain with sex? Great question. So I would probably ask you a lot more follow-up questions, like what does the pain feel like? I don't know if you own a penis or a vagina, this person. So I don't know what kind of pain you're talking about. I'm going to assume, and this is probably a big assumption, but I'm going to assume you're female. And so when you have pain with intercourse, there are several different kinds of pain. There's pain with insertion, pain at the top, at the cervix, or just kind of a burning all over pain, or pain that starts and goes away. So I'd probably have to ask you a lot of follow-up questions about the pain that you're experiencing, because they kind of have different solutions based on the pain that you're experiencing. What we do know is that our vaginas tent after they are aroused. So spending a lot of time in foreplay getting aroused can help with a lot of those painful things. Typically, we try to go and have penetrative sex far too early in our sexual experiences, especially when you're first having sex. So spend a lot of time in foreplay to make sure your vagina is tented and ready for sex. One of the suggestions I make is to just put a playlist on your phone of songs that are between 13 and 20 minutes long, and put that playlist on repeat. Make them songs that make you think sexy thoughts or whatever, and put that playlist on repeat. And don't listen to those songs other than sex, because it'll make this nice Pavlov stimulus response kind of thing. So when you hear that first song, you're like, oh yeah, let's go. Okay, so make this playlist between 13 and 20 minutes, and don't have penetrative sex until you hear that first song again. So that makes sure you're spending enough time in foreplay. And let me tell you, if you haven't done this in the past, 13 minutes is going to seem like a long time. But that is really the appropriate amount of time for most women to be fully aroused. So start with your sexual activities, and after 13 to 20 minutes, and only after 13 to 20 minutes, progress into penetrative sex. Da, 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 da. Thank you, that's very sweet. You guys all right? We good? Nobody's, throwing things at me yet, so that's good. Nice. What is a nice, caring way of saying, I need more, foreplay or something, love or foreplay, something like that? What is a nice, caring way of saying, I need more love or foreplay? So you can say, hi, I would like more love and foreplay. That's a good start. Let's use the NVC process. I noticed last time we had sex, we didn't spend a lot of time cuddling. When that happens, I feel less cared for. Do you think that next time we could spend a few more minutes cuddling? Ta-da! My partner states that he prefers sex in the morning. I am not, triple underlined, a morning person. A struggle in our relationship is I would like more sex. How can we meet each other's needs? How do I get more sex? Is it really just getting up early? How to get a partner to be open and vulnerable? Very good questions. I like that you know what you like. That's good. You know you don't like it in the morning, and that's just fine. So you would have to navigate this situation. So very rarely do you have two partners who love sex at, the same exact moment of the day, okay? There are times where most people would rather not have sex, like right after eating 3 pizzas, for example, or like drinking that milk when you're lactose intolerant, okay? Probably not a good time. Other than that, most people have these kind of natural rhythms to their sex life that they like sex in the morning or at night or in the middle of the afternoon. And you have to navigate what that looks like for your own relationship. So maybe sometimes it is in the morning, okay? But think about what you don't like about that morning sex. Is it because you're tired? Is it because you're thinking about too many things on your mind about the day? Could you schedule it on a day where you don't have to rush out the door, like a Sunday? Could it be mid-morning? Could it be like brunch sex? Okay, so just make a little bit more plans. Use some intention in scheduling your sex life, and then build that anticipation around it. Does it mean you have morning sex all the time? No. You have sex when you want to have sex too. But you plan it. You have to talk about it. It's a give and take, and then prepare yourself. It's not helpful for your marriage to go into sex with a resentful heart. Oh, fine. Just get it over with. Nobody likes to have sex like that, okay? This is a very distinct description, but I have, this happens a lot. I have many people that will come and say to me, I feel like I am just masturbating inside of my wife. So the important part is the authenticity of the sex. It's not the frequency. It's not the excitement. It's not the games or whatever. It's the authenticity. Show up. Show up for sex. It's good for you, and it's good for your partner, and it's good for the relationship. I already forgot the question. Oh, morning sex, yes. How to get your partner to be more vulnerable, open up and be more vulnerable. Baby steps. So you try little things. Hey, I noticed that we have never tried A, B, or C. Do you think that we could talk about trying A, B, or C? Or if you are longing for more vulnerable discussions, find a list of questions. Hey, can we talk about these lists of questions? Do Gary Chapman's love languages. Do quizzes together. Find some source of vulnerable discussions that you can use as a tool. Whoa, this person has really great handwriting. Wow. Okay. Thank you so much for being the voice to such an important topic. You're welcome. And an essential part of human experience. I'm a virgin, I love sex, and I believe it is one of God's most intimate gifts to us. In the church, masturbation is frowned upon, yet never addressed. What are your thoughts on masturbation and personal sexual exploration or pleasure? Hey. So my thoughts are, I'm sorry, y'all just take a big deep breath. It's okay, everybody's gonna be okay. We're just talking about normal, everyday stuff. Okay, so I'm basically here to help you ask yourself the harder questions. I don't want to be giving you all of the answers. I'm gonna give you tools, I'm gonna give you resources, but I can't give you the answer of what's right for you. Just like we're all built differently, we all come from different backgrounds and have these different expectations about sex. Masturbation is one of those things, okay? Masturbation is one of those things that we come from a variety of backgrounds about. But I want you to ask yourself the questions. What makes masturbation one of those things that you are adverse to or that people are adverse to? Okay? Usually the answer is that people think it's a selfish act. People think it's a selfish act. Well, I'd like to challenge that in that for many people, it is a way to self-explore. Just like trying new foods, right? When we see our kiddos touching themselves as little tiny kids, they are exploring their sexuality. This is a normal, healthy thing for them to do. It isn't hardly even sexual at that point. They're exploring their genitals. I believe, especially for women, that self-pleasure can be, or at least touching, can be a way to discover what feels good for you. Okay? It's difficult to ask for what you want when you have no idea what you want, or no idea how to make that happen. But I realize that's not everybody's view. So you have to discover what is the wisdom for you. How do you feel about self-exploration and masturbation? How do you feel like it could serve you or not serve you? It's one of those really hard subjects that everybody's doing. A lot of people are doing. So when it comes to figuring out how you feel about it, deconstruct some of those messages that you got. Figure out how to bridge from where you are to where you want to go. You know, this particular question was from somebody who'd never been in a sexual experience with a partner. I think it's a great place for you to start on your own, self-exploration. But that might not be the answer for all of you, and that's okay. What is the most effective way to bring about an erection and to maintain it for some time? Natural things. Natural things or drugs or devices. Okay. So erectile dysfunction is one of those things we talked about earlier. It can have two separate causes. One is mental and one is physiological. So it depends on the type of ED that you're experiencing for what can help. Now there are things medication-wise that can help with that. And there are things medication-wise that can give you ED, like blood pressure medications, for example. So it just really depends. It's a difficult one. But if you aren't able to establish an erection, it's time to start broadening your idea of what sex and pleasure really look like in your life. Yes, there are drugs. You probably know them. Just watch any commercial after Jane Pauley's Sunday morning, and you'll see all the medications. And there are devices. Some are better than others. But really, truly, you would want to see what is the root of the cause of the ED and then go from there. The 3 pillars of sexual wealth are intimacy, excitement, and commitment. Da-da-da. You guys are hanging in there like champions. Oh, when to talk with your child about sex? That's a great question. So come on out tomorrow. We're going to have a whole hour discussion about how to raise sexually healthy kids and how to talk to your kids about sexual health. What I like to say, the short answer is, and I have a list of kind of the things, the general topics to talk about at what age. The generic answer is this: have a conversation with your kids that starts early and matures as they mature. Notice I didn't say have a talk with your kids. I want you to establish a conversation that grows as they grow. Okay, so at 5, my girls know a lot, because I'm their mother, obviously. They're going to know a lot. But I'm going to take that conversation and add to it when they're 7, and add to it when they're 10 and 12 and whatnot. Okay? Here's a funny story that'll make you laugh. I was at the pool the other day with my kids, and I had just given them 2 new goggles, and I have taught from a very young age the girls to understand and name their body parts appropriately for lots of different reasons. The main one is, should, God forbid, something terrible ever happen to them, I need them to be able to tell me exactly what happened. It's one of the reasons why I'll always encourage you to use the correct terminology with your kids. So anyway, my kids know the correct terminology. They have always. And so I'm on one side of the pool, my daughter's on the other side of the pool in her new goggles, and I don't know if you can tell from there, I'm an incredibly tall person. So I'm in the pool in a one-piece swimsuit, and what happens when you're an incredibly tall woman in a one-piece swimsuit, that swimsuit literally tries to murder you vertically this way the whole time you're wearing it. So unless you get miles of added fabric from here to here, it just kind of pulls you like this the whole time. So this is important because I'm on one side of the pool and I have to adjust. I just have to kind of pull my swimsuit out of my throat. I have to get my swimsuit, I'll adjust it accordingly. My kiddo's on the other side and she has her goggles on and she lifts out of the water and she says excitedly, "Mom, I saw you touch your vagina underwater." Where's her mother? You her mother? So that could happen to you. I'm just saying, if you talk to your kids about these things, that could happen. It was cool. We just never went back. It was fine. Sex and Sabbath, how are they compatible? I think they work out real well, personally. Sex and Sabbath, how are they compatible? Yeah, I think that the Sabbath has been given to us as a gift of rest and connection with our family. I think that's the most beautiful way you can do that and serve our Lord and Savior. What do you do if you are divorced or single and you want to live by biblical principles? I'd ask you what your interpretation of biblical principles were. How do you keep sex in the later years of life? Yeah, so this is a great question, one that I love. I love working with people in their more vintage seasons of life. It's one of my favorite populations. So I think I said before, I work a lot with the Alzheimer's Association and the hospice, the local hospice in my town, to help people connect intimately throughout their later years. So this is something that we have never really had to deal with before, because prior to these last few generations, people haven't lived as long. So now we have people who are living a really long time and wanting to stay connected and close throughout the golden years. And so what I would say to you is redefine what sex is to you. We know that most people want sex to be a combination of pleasure and closeness. Okay? Can you foster that even if you don't get an erection? Can you foster that even if you have mobility issues? Can you foster that even if your partner doesn't recognize you anymore? Okay? So these are hard, tough questions that we need to ask, because your desire to be intimate and close to your partner doesn't fade with age, right? How do you keep those connections? So one of the suggestions, it's not specifically related to your exact question, but it is related to the later years. One of the things that I suggest for couples who are going through the Alzheimer's classes that I talk to is to create together a notebook of pictures of the things that you love to do together, the things that helped you feel intimately connected. So, for example, say Bob and Trina, they have this routine of eating waffles every Sunday morning on their porch. So there's a picture of that in their notebook. Trina always said, "I love it when you hold my hand in the car." So they have a picture of that in their notebook. Trina always said, "I love it when we sing our old songs together, around our radio." So they have a picture of themselves singing together. Trina is now in the later stages of Alzheimer's and doesn't recognize her partner, okay? She is also sensitive to touch, so he can no longer touch her to be intimate with her. But every time that he is longing that closeness, he takes that notebook and he talks to her about all those moments. She is in a facility now, but he can talk to her about every Sunday we used to do waffles, and she still smiles because the emotions typically aren't gone. The emotions that foster typically are gone. Even when the memory fades, emotions don't. So it's things like that, understanding the broadness of sexual experiences and how to foster them as things come off the table. The best book you suggested to read about sex, spirituality, and God. Ooh, that's a good one. The best one? I do love, there's one called Sex God. There's another one called Sex and God. That's good. There's one called Sheet Music. That's pretty good. This is not specifically related to spirituality and God, but one of the best books I ever read was called Mating in Captivity by Esther Perel. And it doesn't necessarily take the elements of God, but there's great sexual help in that book and understanding how we navigate our sex lives. Good question. Or my book that I'm writing called How to Have Sex, because there's no book out there called How to Have Sex. Don't steal my idea, guys. How many times a week is it considered to have a healthy sex life? What do we know? Y'all could answer this question by now. How about desire for another person that is not your partner? That's a great question. A great question. So what do we do when we desire somebody that is not our partner? First of all, you should know that this is normal. It means you're a functioning human person who at times has a desire for another person. Know that you are normal and that this is common. And the best thing to do is talk to somebody about it and release it, right? Acknowledge the feelings. I had a feeling. I had an attraction to this person. Acknowledge that they're there, and usually that can kill it. And obviously don't pursue anything about it, okay? How do you talk about a healthy sex life with adult single children? First of all, I would define for yourself what healthy sex is. What are you going to say? I would figure out what it is that you want for your child. The biggest thing that we can do for our children is understand that they are sexual beings. They are sexual beings. And that our ultimate goal for our children is that they have a loving, enjoyable sex life that is fostered towards the knowing, right? So anything else that you want to say about that, if they're single adult children, probably the best thing you can do is just be there for them to answer questions when they come up, okay? Be that person that they can trust. As an adult, they probably don't need you to explain much more, but they may need you to be there for them. ED, erectile dysfunction. So my husband is an emergency medicine physician, so we have very different professions, obviously, but ED is written all over his stuff because for emergency department, and ED is written all over my things for erectile dysfunction, and it's really weird when, like, I'm reading his stuff, and anyway. I'm postmenopausal and taking SSRIs, which kill libido. Yes, many of them do. Any way of working through this? Yes. So, managing your sex through disease is difficult. I will acknowledge that it's a difficult thing to do. But figuring out when during the day, if you are continuing to be on your SSRIs, when during the day you feel a little bit more like engaging in sexual activity, figuring out when the best times of day, when you're feeling the best, when you are feeling less responsible or less down or less anxious, and how to manage those things, then start to add in a little bit of sexual activity. Now, it doesn't have to be penetrative sex, right? It could be cuddling, it could be, kissing or just holding hands or anything that you feel can foster some of that intimacy. Do that. There's no need to, always go all the way. You can foster that pleasure and closeness through other things. And as you feel more comfortable, start adding a few more things. But don't put pressure on yourself to always go all the way with sex. Another erectile dysfunction question. We might just get through all of these, my friends. If I can only have an orgasm through oral sex, am I abnormal? No. You're not abnormal. Everybody has different mechanisms of their sexuality. So if there are some things that bring you to orgasm and other things that don't, you would be just a normal person, normal human that has different types of sexual functioning, and that's okay. When I read your question, I kind of wonder if you want to achieve orgasm through other ways, in which case you could probably work on that. It's behavior just like anything else. You can teach yourself ways, response stimuli, ways to orgasm in other ways. You can do it if you wanted to, but no, you're fine if that's the only way you can do it. This question is about mental illness, emotionally ill partners. That is a bigger question, probably out of my range of education. So how to deal with borderline sociopathic mood swings, emotionally ill partners. That would be something you would need to talk to like a psychologist about. I get frustrated at times. No matter how much we explore, I can only seem to orgasm in one way, and I get frustrated. Does that mean it has to stay that way? No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean it has to stay that way. I'm sorry you feel frustrated, but kind of we talked about this before with the other question. You can learn to find pleasure in all sorts of different ways, but getting frustrated with yourself is going to make it more difficult. But just know that you're okay. There's lots of people who don't learn to orgasm for a long time, and mostly women. And it just takes some time. Nobody's good at sex the first time. Nobody. And even after years, sometimes it takes some time to figure out how to do it in other ways. But I would ask you more questions about what's going on and figure out how we can put a stimulus with a response, a needed response, so that you can learn how to do it in other ways. Ideas for your anniversary. Ooh. It depends. What do you want your anniversary to look like? Do you want fireworks? Do you want intimacy? Do you want all three? All three. 2? Do you want, I don't know which anniversary it is, your first anniversary or your 60th anniversary? I don't know. But I always like to say, go somewhere other than your house, first of all. Even if you just rent a hotel room for the night, what you're doing is removing the idea of those responsibilities. So when you're in a hotel room, that's why sex can be very exciting in a hotel room, because you're not thinking about the laundry and if I should paint the ceiling eggshell or linen. You can just totally focus on your partner. Dating each other and going places together, away from your kids, without your kids or parents or anybody, just places together alone can do phenomenal things for your relationship. So on your anniversary, for sure, go on a date, maybe get a hotel room, and foster that sense of freedom and safety that you find within your relationship, and freedom that you find outside of your house. How do you talk to your kids about sex when they are already grown up and I have never talked to them before? Married with older mom, how often is healthy? Okay, we talked about how often is healthy. If your kids are already grown up, you've never talked about sex, they probably already know about sex. So it wouldn't be a physiological talk. It would probably be more like, hey, do you have any questions? I'd be willing to talk to you about any questions that you have at this point, or find a resource that you like, a book that you like, and share it with them. Acceptable. Is there any acceptable coupleship that always... Sorry, I can't read that one very well. Thank you. You guys are hanging in there. Feel free to go if you need to go. You don't have to stay. Yes, my husband often states that in the middle of the night is when he is most ready for sex, and the best time for him. How should I handle this? Pretend I am sleeping or join in his wishes? It's a classic move. Classic. I call it the envelope. It's like covers are tucked tightly here. There's no way anybody's getting in. Yeah, so this is a question about timing, and we've kind of talked about timing. Don't think about it in terms of giving in or not giving in. That's not going to be great sex anyway. If you're giving in to sex, don't do it. Don't give in, right? Either have sex because you want to have sex or don't. But since that is your partner's favorite time, you need to negotiate. Negotiate what is going to be good and plan it. You know, if you want to have sex Thursday night, plan it. That way you're off the hook for the other nights and you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to do the karate chop when the hand comes across. Okay? Negotiate. Talk about it, and then keep talking about it until you're sick of talking about it, and then talk about it some more. What things or activities could be planned to make sex interesting and exciting? That's a great question. I would probably follow up that question with asking you, well, what does your sex life look like now? Because I have no idea what would make sex more exciting for you if I don't know what you're already doing. So my answer, I guess, would be get a little bit vulnerable. Figure out something that you haven't tried before, either an activity or a way to approach sex. Change up your sexual script a little bit. How do I cope with my husband's visual nature when I don't feel attractive as the women around me? I feel like I am not enough. Who identifies with that? Yep. So this has to do with sexual worth, the fourth rung in our pyramid. Feeling like you're not enough, like you're not worthy of pleasure, like you don't look like the girls in pornography, you don't look like the girls on TV, you don't look like the girls maybe even around you, right? But just like frequency of sex, comparison is the thief of joy. Comparison is the thief of joy. So, it used to be in the psychology community, we talked about increasing self-esteem, and now we realize that's just making things worse. If I tell you, you need to increase your self-esteem, I'm basically telling you're still doing things wrong. You still need to improve, right? So now we talk about increasing self-compassion. Understanding what you love about yourself, there has to be some things that you love about yourself, and hold on to those feelings and then go from there, grow from there. Figure out what you love about yourself, even if it means understanding your body functionally. Maybe there's nothing you love visually about your body, but you love that your size 11 feet carry you and your twins, okay? Maybe you don't love the way you look after having a baby. So you can think about it and what that gave your family, those kiddos. So self-compassion is the key to understanding and being feeling worthy of love. That's I'm going to skip that one. You're all going, what did she skip? Kind of a repeat question. How to tell your spouse to slow down and get not so stressed out, so sex can be enjoyed fully and not half-heartedly. So how you tell your sex to slow down is by saying, hey, can you please slow down? That's how you tell them. And then getting stressed. I don't know if the stress is about the rhythm of the sexual experience or if it's about not showing up authentically. So sex can be enjoyed fully and not half-heartedly. I would probably ask you more questions about what feels half-hearted about your sex. How to deal with a situation where both partners are on different levels of the pyramid. Yeah, most partners are on the different levels of the pyramid most of the time, because you move up and down like this all the time. Sometimes you're just trying to, sometimes you don't even feel like you are being loved in a relationship or that you belong in a relationship. And sometimes you feel like you are truly intimately connected and knowing each other. And sometimes one of you is here and the other one is there, and that's okay. You just talk about it. Hey, I noticed that last time we had sex, I didn't feel this way or this way or this way, or I felt this way or this way or this way, or we did this and I felt this way. So talk about it. Talk about it, talk about it, talk about it. Thank you for speaking. You're welcome. You're welcome. I know the people who are parents are laughing right now because they know I have 5-year-olds and I've seen Moana about 30,000 times. Is oral an appropriate form of sexual intimacy? I don't know. You tell me. You tell me about your relationship. Again, I can't give you the answers. I can give you better questions to ask. I can help you ask yourself better questions. But as far as what you feel is appropriate and inappropriate, think about how you worship. Like when there's a worship team up front here, do you raise your hands? Do you clap? Do you not sing at all? Those are all questions that you have to come up with. What feels appropriate for you? We enjoy sex 2 to 3 times a day. We love it, but I'm so tired. How can we slow down? Great question. Why are you here? Just kidding. You can slow down by saying, hey, I'm tired. Can we please not have sex the next hour? Done. Let's talk about how we can meet each other's sexual needs together, instead of only meeting the frequency that works for you. Another question about oral sex. Dun, dun, dun. Another masturbation question. Thank you. Dun, dun, dun. Short amount of time in a place that is conducive to good sex. Awesome. Do you have recommended resources for additional study? Do I have a book? I will. Or do you recommend books or resources? Yes. So several things. I love Mating in Captivity by Esther Perel. I love Sheet Music is a really good one. I love The God of Sex, Sex God. I love Sexual Intelligence is a great book. And the last one I probably would recommend would be Marty Klein's book, Dr. Marty Klein. Dr. Debbie Herbenek also has lots of great books on sex. I also have a class if you want to take my online class. It is, why do men have low libido? We typically focus on women, yes, nurturing it, but as a marriage counselor, I see lots of men with lower libido. Yes, this is true. So we typically focus on women because it's more prominent in women, but men have absolutely low libido too, and it has to do with the exact same things, that responsibility piece. You know, if you feel overwhelmed or stressed, too responsible for too many things, that's going to kill your libido, regardless if you're a man or a woman. Healthy ways to be sexually fulfilled prior to being in a marriage relationship and sexually active. Yeah, so you would have to ask yourself what you want, how do you want to get there, and what you do now to fulfill yourself, to be fulfilled in your relationship later on in life. So always think of the long-term goal, right? I want a healthy sexual relationship when I do find a marriage partner eventually. What can I do now that fosters that? And that for you may be a lot of different things. It may be exploration, it may not be exploration. It may be talking about sex with your partner at the time, or exploring sex on your own through journaling activities, or whatever. But you have to kind of figure out what you feel comfortable with. I can't tell you what you feel comfortable with. What advice would you give young couples trying to abstain from premarital sex? Yeah, this is a great question. So don't make it difficult on yourself. Sex is powerful. Sex sells hamburgers, it sells Drano, it sells cars. You know, to think that sex isn't powerful would be a lie to ourselves, right? Sex is very powerful. So that's why I always suggest that people be very careful. If you are engaging sex before you're married, so you know, my practice is diverse. So I see a lot of different types of people, not just people who identify as Christian. So I have a very inclusive depth of practice. So when I see people engaging in sex before they're married, like, just know sex is really powerful. It connects people in ways that you can't even imagine. So when you are trying to abstain from sex before you're married, know that it will be difficult, and that's normal. But set yourself up for success. Set yourself in environments that make it easier. Or talk about what you want to do, what you don't want to do. Talk about your end goal. Your end goal is a sexually healthy marriage, right? If that's your end goal, What do you do now? Are you sure you're going to marry each other? If you're not sure, figure out what that looks like in this relationship so that you have an end goal of a sexually healthy marriage. Da, 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 da. You guys all right? You need like a drink or something? If you have established safety and consent in your relationship, are there limits to what you can or should do in sex? Interesting. Are there limits to what you can do or should do in sex? So I will say this. I think sex is a creative process, okay? Sex is literally creating intimacy, creating connection. It should be creative. It should be creative. How can I build healthy sex when trust is broken? Ooh, that's a hard one. That's a hard one. Work on the trust. Work on the trust. I hope that there is a marriage and family therapist in your life. And the sex will come. Sometimes the sex helps create the trust, too. But trust is one of those things that takes a long time to build back up. A long time and a lot of right moves. Sex is very painful, so I have zero desire for it. Yeah. Any tips? I am not very old. Okay. So, again, I'm going to assume that this is a female person. I don't know. I'm going to assume that this is a female person. So, we talked about painful sex a while ago. And when you, as a female, are starting to have sex, it could be very, very painful. So making sure that you're spending enough time in foreplay, making sure that you have a lubricant, like a water-based lubricant. Here's one thing that we didn't mention before. Lubricants are really important, especially as you age and you lose some of that vaginal lubrication that happens naturally. Definitely get yourself a nice water-based lubricant that can help with any pulling or pain with intercourse. It is a misnomer that natural vaginal lubrication equals arousal. Natural vaginal lubrication does not always equal arousal, okay? So don't use that as a litmus test. Don't be afraid to use your lubricants. Thank you so much. You're welcome. 3 pillars of sexual wealth. I clearly did not handle this very well, did I? Commitment, intimacy, and excitement. I need to apparently change my PowerPoint to include that one more slide about the pillars of sexual wealth, because I didn't actually say it. What does pornography do to a relationship? Whew. Getting tired. No, I'm kidding. All right, let's talk about porn just briefly. And I'm just going to give you the highlights of pornography, okay? So when you have something like pornography that is intended to entertain people, and we use it as education, not intentionally usually, but people at this point are growing up on a diet of pornography, kids, the average age of young men to see their first porn is around 12, between 10 and 12. And at some point, almost 90% of people have seen or do consume pornography, so it's a big deal. It's a big deal. So pornography does several things. So when we use entertainment, things that are marketed to entertain people, as education, we get really confused. So it's kind of like if you're using pornography as a litmus test for what sex is supposed to look like, you're going to be real disappointed in your real sex life because they're not the same. Okay, we can't even put pornography in a sex category. It is entertainment, okay, and not a healthy one. So we have this entertainment that's marketed mainly towards men, that is so highly accessible, and it gives us these really skewed variations of what sex should look like, what people should look like and sound like when they're having sex. And we in the sexology community, Christian or non-Christian or faith-based or not faith-based, we're trying desperately to keep up with what porn has presented us with. So pornography can do a lot of interesting things in a relationship. It can create expectations that are unreachable. It can create expectations that are not healthy. And it can create, among other things, a lot of shame on either party's part, okay? So it's kind of like the base layer of the topic of pornography. But it has some pretty interesting, long-lasting, and detrimental effects. And we're still trying to figure out how to even handle it in my community, in the sexology community, much less in the broader community. The biggest thing is I would love if I could just take away the shame that people feel from consuming pornography in the past or currently, and really have a true conversation about what it's doing and how it's eroding our relationships without making or having people experience shame, if that makes sense. Because we can't have healthy conversations when shame is involved. Another question about pornography. There isn't intimacy. I feel like porn is ruining our ability to connect. Yeah, sometimes that happens. How do you develop intimacy, communication, and excitement when your partner has a porn addiction? Lots of questions about porn. To be honest, it's an entire lecture that we need to do separately. Because there's just so many elements to porn, layer upon layer upon layer. So what happened was, in 1993, 1994, broadband internet became available to most of the United States. And when that happened, we noticed an increase in the consumption of porn. So before 1992, 1993, 1994, the way you would digest explicit material was to what? Walk down to the convenience store, pick up a Hustler or a Playboy, whatever. And you would have maybe a total of 15 images in one magazine, or a total of 30 minutes on a film or whatever. What happened in 1993, 94, 95, broadband internet, and people started consuming porn 5, 6, 10, 100 times the rate of how you can consume it in magazine print form or video cassette form. And so this presented us with a very weird problem of people being so overexposed to sexually explicit material that it was infiltrating into their actual sex lives. So I have clients who have been watching porn for a long time, over 50 years, and can no longer get an erection with an actual partner. I have many women in my practice come talk to me about how they feel like they can't live up to expectations set by porn. It's a very unhappy place to be. I have people in my practice who the male partner thinks there's no big deal to watching porn, and the female partner wants to get on board with that, but really just feels really bad about it, okay? So there's a whole spectrum of issues with pornography, which is why I love to talk about healthy sex, because when we are raised on this digestion of pornography or explicit imaging, even from the regular TV shows we watch, we're only seeing this one very small aspect of sex, and that's what we think sex should look like, because nobody is talking about it in real, healthy ways. And I think the antidote to those explicit images is talking about it in real, healthy ways. I feel overwhelmed with responsibilities. It's not easy to make love. Yeah, it's not when you feel overwhelmed. Because you want to feel free in your sex life. You want to feel authentic, and you want to feel like you can let go and get vulnerable. And that's really difficult to do when you feel overwhelmed. Do you recommend any toys for women or men? It depends. I'd have to talk to you about that. It depends on the situation. There is nothing that is better than the connection between two people. There's no toy that could replace that connection. Although if that helps with things, then you do you. Helps with arousal and things like added stimulation and things like that. But a toy is never going to replace a human. What do you suggest for single unmarried people? Kind of talked about that. Started taking high blood pressure medication and it's affecting libido. Yes, if you are a male person, high blood pressure medication affects libido because you just can't get the blood to the penis. You can't get enough blood pressure to the penis. Repeat. If libido is so different between men and women, do you have any advice to find a balance so both sides have fulfillment? Examples, sure. So when we talk about libido being different between men and women, usually men are just ready faster than women are or more often than women are. So an example of trying to find a happy medium is talking about when you want to have sex, just talking about it. So that way your partner can get ready and get in the mood. One of the things that I love to have my couples do is to take Gary Chapman's 5 love languages test. Because if you can figure out your partner's love language. So anybody familiar with the love languages? A few, good. I love it. So if you can figure out what your partner's love language is, if it's acts of service, quality time, physical touch, whatever it is, if you can foster that more, it'll make the sex better. Because I believe everything between orgasms or sexual experiences is foreplay. From the time this sexual experience ends to the time this next one happens, all of that is foreplay. So the vacuuming, the little notes, the words of encouragement, the help around the house, the holding hands in the movie theater, all of that is going to foster your next great sexual experience. I'll do just a few more, then we'll close. A question about kids, talking to kids about sex, parents. What should I say to my kid? I like what Pastor Roberts had to say this morning about there's lots of wisdom to give to your kids. There's lots of things you can say to your kids, and you're all going to come from a different aspect of it. Like some of you are going to encourage your kids to wait until they're married. Some of you are not going to encourage your kids to wait until you're married. That's up to you. But what's important is that you become that person they come to with questions. That's the most important part. That you become the person they talk to for questions. And love your spouse. There's nothing better you can do for your kids than to date and love your spouse. Erectile dysfunction. We sleep in the nude. Is it healthy for promoting intimacy? Heck yeah. Absolutely. I like a practical couple. Just going to go ahead and take that barrier out of there. Talk to kids, types of sex. Olympic sex fosters excitement. How can I have more pleasure? Best way to have pain-free sex, if you're a female, spend more time in arousal and use a lubricant. And on to the next 3 hours, I'm just kidding. I think those are all empty. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey to the knowing, on this journey to healthy sexuality based on a model that we have biblically. Thank you so much for becoming vulnerable, for being here. You're the reason I do what I do, so thank you so much. And thank you to the Loma University Church for trusting me with this information and trusting that you would need this information and giving us this opportunity to be together. I'm going to just close with a quick prayer, if that's okay. All right. Heavenly Father, thank you for the opportunity to discuss something that is often overlooked, but yet so needed and such a beautiful, authentic part of our relationships and a mirror to the intimacy that we want to have with you. Thank you for everyone who showed up and for everyone who's going to make it a little more space in their relationship for vulnerability. We praise your name, we ask these things, and we live in your grace. Amen.
We want to thank you very much for joining us this evening. We wish you God's grace and blessings in the coming week. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. down at Damaso Amphitheater. God be with you. We look forward to seeing you next weekend as well.